Alright, so for those of you who are here from the link on TikTok, you already know what we're going over. If you're here because you came across this on YouTube, welcome. What we're doing here is we're going to be going over the Lagiacrus or the Lagiacrus. I say both because everyone's going to be mad whether I say it one way or the other. So why not make both, right? So, this video is going to be part of a series I want to do where I'm going to look at all the monsters from Monster Hunter because Wilds is up on the rise here. No pun intended with rise. But I want to make a list of all of them. Yeah, it's going to be a big list because considering how many there are. But I want to rank them all, not on my opinion like a lot of people do. I want to rank them basically off of are they a good monster? Are they a good monster? Do they do their specific actions? Like do they play their role good? Do they do a good job at being who they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to be? So, topic of the discussion this time, one of my old favorites that I think deserves a bit more attention, because everyone I've seen likes Lagiacrus. Nobody really hates him, but I don't think he got a fair shake at it. You know what I mean? So, what is Lagiacrus? Lagiacrus is he was the first flagship monster for the whole third generation, that's a big thing. Being a flagship's one thing, but being the face of a generation is another. So the fact that he was the face of the third generation is crazy. That he's not in more games. He's in all of the third. He's in Tri, and I'm pretty sure he's in. I know he's in 3 Ultimate, and I know he's in Generations Ultimate. But he hasn't made a return since Generations Ultimate. There were rumors and speculations he'd show up in Rise, or not Rise, yes, Rise, but First World. And unfortunately, that just never came to fruition. They claim he was just too hard to render in their world that they made. And I'm like, okay. You brought Mizutsune back in Rise. You made Almudron for Rise. You've got Royal Ludrith's been around since, the third generation. But Laggy's got a problem being rendered. I don't know. So maybe in World, or not World, God, I'm so tired. Maybe in Wilds, we'll get to see Laggy again. So here's what I want to do. So Laggy being a flagship monster, that comes with certain, criteria to meet, certain obligations to meet. You need to be the flagship needs to be the goal. Like the first big goal you have as a hunter is to take on the flagship, because the flagship not only is the first thing you see on the cover, they're usually one of the first monsters you see in the cutscenes that introduce you into the game. And the village that you're doing quests for is always hyping them up like, oh man, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be a good fight, man. This thing's terrorizing us, but you're not ready yet. You gotta work your way up there, kid. But Laggy is interesting because there are certain flagships that you face off with beforehand, before before the end game there, that like a good flagship, I think, is the way they do it, because obviously one of my favorite monsters is Nargacuga. Nargacuga is only met, after a certain amount of quests are done. There's not really he's on the cover, he's in the intro cutscene, but he doesn't show up any until his quest when you fight him. And I'll go over him in his own video. But Laggy shows up out of nowhere. You're doing a gathering quest. You're like, okay, cool. Go out there and get me, some stuff from these monsters. Go kill these little jobbers. Bring their stuff back to the village. Okay, cool. So you go out there and this is beautiful because this introduced underwater mechanics. Unfortunately, they were introduced on the Nintendo Wii. So things aren't too swell on the Nintendo Wii. Tri has a lot of issues. I'll go over the games themselves at a different time. But why would you... I feel like they jumped the gun. I feel like they had a really, really solid idea. And then they kind of just... They thought, can I do this rather than should I do this? You know? So when Capcom released Underwater Mechanics on the Wii, it became a problem because not only because of the Wii controls, you had to have the nunchuck and everything. Now, yeah, the Pro Controller was a thing, but not everyone had a Pro Controller. I never had a Pro Controller. So the fact I never had a Pro Controller either, I relate more to the people who didn't. And yeah, fighting underwater is not the best thing in try. And you're slower than anything under the water. The trade-off being everything that you fight underwater sucks on land for land-based combat, except maybe Royal Ledrith. He's kind of a mixed set. But that's kind of where we're going to go with Laggy. So, back to where I was going with the first bit there, before I went on that whole tangent. So Laggy first shows up when you're on a quest to gather some monster guts, I believe is what they want you gathering on that quest. You go out into the area with the beach, Area 10, and you go into the water for the first time, and you're like, wow, this is really beautiful. Like, the underwater is beautiful. There's a special music for under there. The audio is different because you're submersed, and it's just beautiful to see all the giant monsters that live underwater. They're very, very unique. And you're swimming around. You kill some of them. I can't remember what they're called. Euthanaths or something? It's been a while. But I'll look into that later. Actually, I should have done some research this time around. But you go and you kill them. You get your guts, and then there's no more, so you have to go into the next area because these are specifically underwater monsters. You get into the middle of Area 11, no land to be seen, and as you're doing your thing, boom, this giant crocodilian dragon fucking sea serpent just shows up. He just shows up out of nowhere, rolls up in the area, and just looks at you like, I think I'm gonna beat your butt inside out. I'm gonna kick your butt tomorrow. He just rolls up in there and just starts trying to kill you. And you're warned beforehand about this guy too by the village chief. He's like, hey, just a warning, you might run into him out there. We're like 90% sure he's invincible. You can't kill him. You're like, nah, I'll roll up on him. I'll beat him. No, you're not going to do anything to him. Because not only is he way stronger than you, and not only can you not actually do anything to him with, the stuff that you have access to at this time. I mean, if you grind and grind and grind, you can get a viable set that can beat him at this level. But the problem is you cannot beat him right now. Why? Because his health is actually gated. Lagiacrus has a gated health bar to begin with. So you can get him down to limp, but just above limp. So he never actually enters the stage where you can capture him. So this is meant to show how powerful he is, because he's supposed to be feared. You see him in the intro cutscene squaring up on Rathalos. And, nowadays a lot of people are like, oh, Gen 5, Gen 6 players are like, oh, Rathalos? I mean, why that? Back then, Rathalos was something to be respected and feared back in the old gens. Like, you didn't have as many big, flashy, scary monsters back then. And Rathalos was the first flagship ever. That's why he's the flagship. He was the first flagship of World. Because they were like, hey, bringing it back strong, get the OG boy out there. Now, Rathalos has his own video that's going to get there. But Rathalos is the king of the skies for a reason. He's one of the, if not the best, flying wyvern, at least in terms of, flight and speed and just his overall lane. Now, he gets his ass beaten a lot. Absolutely. But by and large, as a whole, Rathalos is usually seen as the superior of the aerial flying wyverns. And he lands in the cutscene, and Lagiacrus just pops up out of the water, and he's like, hey, I'm going to take your food from you, dude. And he just starts squaring up on him, and Rathalos is ready to fight until he sees that Lagiacrus can shoot thunder. Dude just electric eels himself and just tries to go in, and he's like, no, I don't want none of that. That alone is enough to tell all of us back then, hey, he's scared of that thing. Maybe I should be too. Yep. So it's just one of those things where Laggy has been built up, not only in the cutscene, but by the village themselves. Like everyone in the village is like, hey, that thing's terrifying. It's chill, be good, be cool. But then he rolls up and he actually pushes you back. He's like, hey man, you get out of here. Like, dude, he's amazing and he fits what he needs to do and what he needs to be. He needs to be scary. He needs to be powerful. He needs to be a challenge. Now, does he do these things? Well, absolutely. That's what a flagship needs to be, and he does these things well. He does it in spades. The problem lies with the fight. Underwater, he has his thunder abilities underwater have way more range, and he gets the dreaded hip check we're all so used to from Leviathan class and Piscine Wyvern. I always said Piskin, but we're here to piss everyone off, huh? With pronunciations today, so Piskin, Piscine, however you want to say it. Wyverns like Lagiacrus. So Laggy gets the almighty double hip check. He can hip check and hip check twice underwater. So that paired with the fact that Try does not have all the weapons in it, that's just so that in the underwater combat, you're way slower than Laggy. You're way slower. You can't hit as good. He's just running laps around you. So what are you supposed to do? Oh, you just get him on land, and he's a pushover. How do you get him on land? Well, you got to beat him. You got to beat him within a certain health range, and then he'll go on land. Yeah, that's the struggle. But it's worth it because when you get him on land, then he can't do anything. Like he's got some moves here and there that he uses on land, and that's wonderful. But his thunder is dampened a bit because he doesn't have the range because he's underwater, and there's just a whole lot that they could have done better. And they tried to do better because they also in Try have the Ivory Lagiacrus. And Ivory Lagiacrus is the more land adapted version of Laggy. And it still just doesn't work. Because the problem with Laggy is he was made to be an underwater fighter. The problem is that no game has that anymore because after even they got rid of that in the same generation they made it in. Like that's how negatively people responded to it when it came out. It's like it came out in 3 and it was gotten rid of in 3. Like it's nowhere in Gen 4 and 5 or 6. 7, I'm kind of hoping. What am I talking about? 6. Ugh, hang on. No. Ugh. Gen 6 is Wilds. Yeah, okay. So anyway, I'm hoping they bring it back in Wilds. That would be fun, underwater combat, underwater exploration, but make it better. You could make it so much better now with all the, mechanics that we've had in World and in Rise, like wire bugs. Like, dude, that's full-on aerial combat at this point. So, does Laggy do what he's supposed to do? Yes, as a flagship monster. And as a goal and as a wall, he's great. He's actually a fun, challenging battle. The problem is that in Generations Ultimate, he's back. They kind of gave him Ivory's stuff to make him viable on land, but it doesn't really do it. I mean, it's not his fault. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say Laggy meets his criteria. He does his job well, except he doesn't check off that little box of, is it a good fight? Because you got to consider it like a grade point average and Try. Yeah, it's pretty good. GU. Anything past Try, really. Any game that doesn't have the water mechanic in it, he's not good because that's what he was made for. It's not his fault, though. That's a confinement, that's a constriction of the game design. And Capcom not putting the mechanic back in and giving him an actual land-based moveset. Like Royal Ledrith came out in the same game, and he's been going all over the place. He's been in Rise as of late. He just came right back to Rise. Like, you got all kinds of Leviathans in Rise. You could have put Laggy in Rise. He should have been in Sunbreak, honestly. And they could have gave him any number of things to make him viable. Now, if he's not in Wilds, that's gonna be a problem. People are not gonna be happy. I'm not gonna be happy if he's not in Wilds, because Laggy deserves a comeback. GU was a bit of his comeback, and they kind of squawked it. You know, I just feel like Laggy doesn't get a good shake. You know, a lot of people defend him and they're like, "Oh, he's such a cool monster," because he is a cool monster. It's a giant crocodile dragon with electric eels mixed into him. Like, that's a cool concept for a monster. It's really cool, especially for a flagship in the face of a generation. Laggy's great. I love Laggy. Objectively speaking, Laggy does what he's supposed to do. He does fill his niche. And as Lord of the Seas, he's not really contested, you know? I mean, there's not a lot that can roll with a Laggy underwater. But we haven't seen a lot of underwater yet. So hopefully we'll see more coming up in Wilds. But as far as Laggy goes, I'm going to say, honestly, we gotta keep in mind, we got the whole game series in this list coming up. So, I personally would put Laggy in an A, as an A tier. We're going traditional, S to F, right? A tier for Laggy. Why? Because Laggy meets everything. He's everything he needs to be. He's terrifying. He's regal. He looks regal, like a true lord of the seas. He fits every criteria a flagship needs to fit. From what a flagship should be. Which, I'm not really an authority on what a flagship should be, but I think it's pretty straightforward what they need to be, because that's the whole point of picking them as the flagship, is they need to be him, so to speak. You know what I mean? Or her sometimes, because sometimes we have monsters that are flagships that are perceived as more feminine, female. Rathian's never been one, but Mizitsune is usually, and I think people see Gammoth as a female as well, and they were flagships. They'll get their own videos, but Laggy gets an A. The only reason I'm not putting him in S is because you got to look at the grand scale of every monster in the game, coupled with the fact that his fight is just lackluster. And that's the only thing holding it back, is just the fight is not as good as it could have been. But that is not his fault, and you're thinking, well, if that's not his fault, should you really count it against him? I mean, what choice do I have? He hasn't shown back up. Like, no, I can understand. I can understand if Laggy showed up in his game and he was a bad fight like he was. Well, no, not like he was. In GU, he was a bad fight. But the fact he was a good fight in Try, those balance. If he were to come back, if he came back in Sunbreak and he was just the best fight he's ever been, that would boost him back. He'd be an S. I would 100% give Laggy an S. If he comes back to Wilds and they fix it, and they fix Laggy and Wilds, I'll move him up. This list can change. I'm not setting this list in stone. So Laggy, absolutely, I could see him being an S tier. If they fix underwater mechanics, and even if they don't fix underwater mechanics, make him a fun fight on land, like you did with all your other Leviathans. Even Somnicanths, Somnicanth sucks, but still, like, Somnicanth and Almudron, they submerge their bodies partially, in the environment. I mean, at least give Laggy the Somnicanth treatment and make him somewhat submerged, maybe. I don't know. But Laggy needs to come back. I do think he needs to come back, 100%. Because he didn't get a fair shake at it. He was the face of a generation, and not a lot's come from that. Every time you see a flagship, they come back. They always come back. The problem is Laggy hasn't. And they want to say that it's because of the rendering issues, like making his model work. But I'm like, dude, how can you say his model can't work when you've got all kinds of crazy looking monsters in this world? Like Laggy of all things should not be the hardest to put in a game. I mean, when you're putting in creatures like Xeno'jiiva, Safi Jiva, you're putting those into the world, and you're putting in creatures in Iceborne, not Iceborne, you're putting creatures into Rise, like Somnicanth, Almudron, you got Mizitsune jumping around doing stuff. Royal Ludra's been in there. Like, it just, I don't know. That just doesn't seem right. I mean, I'll take the word for it, but at the same time, bring him back. Bring back the Lagiacrus. A tier monster through and through. I love Laggy. I wish I could rank him higher, but unfortunately, I'm trying to make this as objective as I can. Little opinion, and it just seems like Laggy's just not gonna move into S tier unless he comes back to Wild. If he comes into Wilds and he doesn't suck in Wilds, then we'll move him to S. And I will eventually have a big board, big fancy board with all this on it. It's gonna have to be a very big board because there's a lot of monsters to put on here. But that will about wrap it up for this video. Leave a comment. I'm not doing these in any particular order. So leave a comment, and whatever monster, be it a large monster, be it a small monster even, I'll do the jobbers like the Velociprey, I'll do the Vespoids even. I'll do whatever. They're doing every monster we got in anticipation for Wilds coming up. So leave a comment of what you want to be reviewed on here, what monster you want to know about, want to hear about, want to see ranked, put on the list, and whichever one gets the most likes on it, we'll do that one. And hopefully we can get all of these done. And when Wilds comes out, whoever's on this list, if they're in Wilds, we'll do a recount, a redo, and we'll see if they move up or down depending on how they do in that game. So that'll wrap it up for this one, and I'll see you guys in the next one.